And insider Tom Pelissero joins us now. And Tom, the guys are really devastated because you're wearing the backwards hat today and you're letting them down. Do you find it creepy that the guys start every interview with you talking about how great your hair is?
I mean, from Brockman's perspective, I imagine any hair is a point of jealousy. So, I hate to flex on him every single week on the show, even when it's messy, even when
look at
I'm in travel mode here.
Tremendous.
It just, it's still got him beat.
You,
So
you okay over there, Chris? You okay?
I think if you're blessed with that type of lettuce, you should show it off to the people. Let the world see it. But, Tom's his own person. I don't want to judge too hardly here.
Don't judge. I mean, the guys are always mooning over you. And I know how Rich is about it. So, like I said, thank God our kids got my hair. But anyway, let's talk about football, shall we? Flacco, is he an upgrade?
That's going to be the question here, Susie. The Joe Flacco we saw throwing an arm punt interception in Detroit is not that much different than what we've seen from Jake Browning so far. But, certainly Joe Flacco is going to have better weapons for him in Cincinnati. He's throwing the ball to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. That's a lot different than throwing to, Jerry Jeudy and some young players that they have in Cleveland. Joe Flacco has played in this similar type of an offense before. Obviously, Zach Taylor comes from working with Sean McVay in the past. Flacco has played with other former Shanahan McVay assistants. He played with Michael Fleur with the Jets, played with Rich Scangarello years ago in Denver, a tenure that I think a lot of people don't even necessarily remember. And the reason that the coaches in that tree like Joe Flacco is it's the arm twitch. It's the ability to see it and rip it and get the football out really quickly. He's not going to extend plays a ton outside the pocket. He's not the most mobile guy, but he can stand in and he can throw an accurate ball. Really what they're trying to do as much as anything is just calm down the turnovers that have really made life difficult for the Bengals to this point in the season. There'd be a difference if we're talking about going out and trading a pick and taking on cash for Kirk Cousins or trading something of significance for, be it a Russell Wilson or a Jameis Winston. A 5-6 pick swap for a guy making very close to the minimum salary is about as low leverage as it gets here. I thought that perhaps they would give Jake Browning another start here, but when you look at how the schedule lines up, if you're going to give Joe Flacco a whole week to try to microwave that rhythm and timing and tempo and understanding the offense and the feel for his teammates, this is the week to do it, because after that, you got a short week to a Thursday night game against Pittsburgh. They might practice once at most next week. If you were to lose the next two with Jake Browning, all of a sudden you're 2-5, and there's not a lot of point in playing Joe Flacco. So they're going to take their shot right now, and we'll see what type of impact it makes on Sunday against a Packers team that, yes, the Browns beat with Flacco at quarterback, but if you remember that game, they didn't do a whole lot offensively until a late Jordan Love interception gives them a short field for a touchdown. Other than that, the offense didn't do much on that day. I imagine that, Jeff Hafley's sitting there and, basically figured out how to apply, even though we got to cover those receivers differently. We're probably going to attack Flacco very much the same way.
But I think what you're saying about almost calming down the ship, some of the reports out of the camp there were saying that offensive linemen were even saying we're learning so much from him, even in the quick turnaround. What will having a veteran like that do to kind of quell the issues, maybe give them some confidence? God knows he's not going to go in there and light it up, but at the same time, it's just that steadying man at the helm.
Well, it'll be great as long as they're winning. He can be as steadying as he wants, but if the Bengals put up 10 points this week, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. I think that if you broaden this out to the bigger picture here, remember, this is not, hey, we need Joe Flacco to make a playoff run. This is, we need Joe Flacco to keep us a little above 500 until late in the season and hope Joe Burrow is ready to return.
Yeah, but bringing Joe Burrow back, do you think that they really can do that?
Yes, if they are in playoff contention, there is an opportunity here. I mean, it's a 12 to 14 week injury is what I was told when Burrow first got hurt. So you're talking about mid-December if you're pushing it, maybe late December, early January, but somewhere down the line, there is that opportunity out there where perhaps they can get him back down the stretch. And so they're trying to go 500 or a little above. They're not out of it in their own division. Obviously, the Steelers are atop the division right now, and I don't think that anybody's looking at the Steelers as an unbeatable team. You have the Ravens, who are the favorite coming in, and they may have to go out there without Lamar Jackson this week to try to stave off 1-5. When you've got as much money invested, cash and cap, in your star players as the Bengals do, you're thinking about taking our shot right now. And for a Bengals franchise that never makes trades, almost never makes trades, literally 3 players in season, acquired since 1973, Joe Flacco being the third one. This is, them breaking the mold a little bit and saying, you know what, we can't just say, well, let's just try to make do with Jake Browning. They're trying to flip this thing immediately, and it starts out by going up against the Packers team that's coming off a bye and is really, really talented.
You mentioned Lamar. What are we thinking about a timetable for his comeback?
Once he hurt that hamstring against Kansas City, the logic would always have told you that he wasn't going to play in these first 2 games. If it was significant enough to, according to John Harbaugh, there's no way he could have come back against the Chiefs. That's the type of hamstring injury that if you were to try to push him out there a week or 2 weeks later, you run the risk of a setback and something that could linger with him all season, particularly with Lamar's play style. You need him to be able to move around. And so if they can get through this game, they then have the bye. That gives Lamar 3-4 weeks total to heal up. There's no reason as of now to believe he's not going to be ready on the other side of the bye. We'll have to see. Lamar's kind of his own character. He could show up on Friday and decide I'm playing this week. But right now, all the signs point toward another week of Cooper Rush / potentially Snoop Huntley in the lineup, and they've got a really tough task ahead of them on Sunday as well.
Yeah, as a recovering sideline reporter, I'm always happy to talk about soft tissue injuries. What about in Philadelphia? What are we thinking about there with the meeting that looked like it happened on Monday with Saquon, with AJ, with Jalen Hurts? What are you hearing, and is there a there?
Well, I think that in the big picture, and Nick Sirianni alluded to this yesterday, it's a good thing when guys want to talk. It's a good thing when they want to work through issues. The Eagles could easily say, well, we're the Super Bowl champs. We're just going to figure this thing out. Or they can get together and go, all right, how do we as leaders of this team push this going forward and get things going better from an offensive perspective? I personally think that especially on a short week, you're not going to have a lot of practice time to work things out. You're barely even going to review the tape from the prior game. It's got to be your leaders, your highest paid players, your best players need to rise up and drive the change. I mean, you can point very clearly to some statistical anomalies through the course of this season that would tell you why the Eagles offense has been struggling. There's no world in which Saquon Barkley should be getting 1 carry in the second half of the game. You're up 2 touchdowns. There's no world in which A.J. Brown to this point in the season, 5 games in, should have essentially had 1 productive half of football. Jalen Hurts is playing much the same way that we've seen him play in the past. He's obviously really dynamic as a runner. He can make things happen in the passing game. They're just not clicking at this point. Part of the issue with success, Suzy, is that every year you're going to lose. When you win like the Eagles have won, you're going to lose people. And the Eagles have been in this perpetual cycle of either losing a coordinator or choosing the wrong coordinator and having to move on from him. Every year, going back to high school, Jalen Hurts has had a different coordinator. So the same bumps we seem to see every year from the Eagles in the early portion of the season, they're hitting again. This is a team that seemed to have it all figured out down the stretch of last season. The bar is high in Philadelphia. Anybody else would be talking about, well, they're 4-1. Yeah, they got some things to work out offensively. They'll get better at it. With the Eagles, it's DEFCON 1, but they have all the tools in place. They are a relatively healthy football team. They won't have Landon Dickerson tomorrow night at the Giants, but this is absolutely a game that on paper the Eagles should win and win handily. Let's see kind of what the philosophy is out of the gate. I'm a long-standing, going back to his days in Tennessee, I'm a big believer that your offense goes as A.J. Brown goes. He's a tone setter. He makes things happen. Yes, Saquon Barkley's a focal point, but the way that A.J. Brown can dictate things, when you get the ball in his hands, the juice that gives him and the offense, I would not be surprised at all if they make sure they're getting the ball to A.J. Brown early tomorrow night.
And for the Giants, Brian Daboll had some high-level passive-aggressive Jedi mind tricks. I was wondering what you thought about listening to him sending a message down the turnpike.
I should say tonight, by the way. I'm all lost on what day it is. I'm flying there to host this show on Friday. Today's Thursday.
Keeping the seat warm
the game
for you.
Is tonight. Brian Daboll's he's got a lot to work through at this point in the season. Obviously they made the big switch to Jackson Dart. That gave him some juice going into this thing. This is a division game. These are the games that when you hire a coach in the NFC East, you want to be able to win. All right, short week. You're trying to stay relevant here, stay alive. You got to go out and you got to match them toe to toe. They've got a lot of talent that they've amassed on the defensive side. They're obviously trying to figure things out since the Malik Neighbors injury on offense. They get Tyrone Tracy back tonight. They got Cam Scadaboo, rolling pretty well, but they are banged up at wide receiver. No Darius Slayton either. That's not going to make it any easier on a young quarterback. I'll be fascinated to see what Brian Dable might have to do with Jackson Dart in this game. Do they utilize, his legs a little bit more? Do they run more design types of runs just to kind of get him into the game, get him feeling some early confidence? Because you don't have that Malik Neighbors. You can just run a bubble and let him, go to work. You don't have those types of guys. Wan'Dale Robinson is a nice receiver, but you don't have Malik Neighbors on your team. So let's see how they try to get that offense going tonight. And I think that that's going to, say a lot about whether or not they've got an opportunity to pull off an upset that, really could kind of launch them as they go into this mini bye this weekend.
How about San Francisco? Are we going to see Mac Jones? It sure looks like it right now.
It does. Brock Purdy, he tried to come back after missing 2 games. He aggravated that toe injury. Those are tricky. It's not to the extent of the Joe Burrow injury that was surgery in 3 months, but still, anytime you're dealing with a turf toe-like injury, there's a lot of different things. Just the flexion of your foot can aggravate that thing. And set you back. For Brock Purdy, I understand why he wants to get out on the field. I understand why the 49ers want him on the field. And Mac Jones has played really well in his opportunities, but Brock Purdy is the guy that they paid. Brock Purdy is the guy who knows all the ins and outs of this offense. Brock Purdy is the guy who, really unleashes a lot of the different things that you can do. Mac has taken advantage of his opportunity. At minimum, you can sit there and go, listen, we're 3-0 with Mac. You've got time. You don't have to push yourself. Purdy's a competitor. He wants to be out there. But, Mac Jones isn't 100% either. But Mac Jones being close to 100% versus Brock Purdy, running the risk of yet another setback that sets him out for the long term, it certainly seems like the arrows are pointing toward another week of Mac Jones.
And it was interesting to listen to Kendrick Byrne talking about him playing with him, of course, in New England, about how he just sees a much more relaxed player. And I'm curious about you in terms of what you see in him and how he has changed and why you think it's working for him there.
The number one thing, Suzy, is Kyle Shanahan. Mac Jones is a classic Kyle Shanahan quarterback. And when they trade up to number 3 back in 2021, there's a reason that everybody believed it was for Mac Jones. That was a strong consideration for him before they kind of sold themselves on the upside of Trey Lance, had that second workout with him and all that. But if you talk about the traits that Kyle Shanahan looks for in a quarterback, it's somebody who is a fast processor, who is accurate with the football, and that Kyle can make automatic. Kyle Shanahan is as talented as anyone in the NFL at scheming people open, even when he doesn't have Brandon Ayuk, and they traded Deebo Samuel, and Ricky Pearsall is hurt, and Juwan Jennings is hurt. You watched the game last week, he's still scheming people open. Mac Jones is he's a really good fit for that. And, nothing against, some of the people that Mac Jones was working with in New England, but there was no consistency. There was not a long standing, type of a scheme and a process and a plan like they have in San Francisco with Kyle being there almost a decade now. He's in the perfect spot for him. His little bit different personality. He's obviously hyper competitive. I know they talked about it on the broadcast last week. I heard that coming out in the draft that he was like the John McEnroe of the youth tennis circuit, growing up, that he would break rackets and all that type of stuff. But he's also kind of got this, aw shucks personality off the field. He's a really good fit for what they want to do. It's obvious that Mac is enjoying, every second of being able to get back out there and play. 49ers did a 2-year deal with him, by the way. So they've got one of the best values in terms of their backup quarterback, not just this year, but next year as well. But, bigger picture, you think about the other quarterbacks that have gone through and been, healed, so to speak, by either Kyle or Sean McVay. You saw Sam Darnold do that for a year, goes to Minnesota, then gets paid in Seattle. You saw Baker Mayfield for like 6 games, go to LA, then go to Tampa, and now he's back to being a star. Mac Jones could be the next one of those. And I think he's also an important reminder when we're quick to write off quarterbacks in particular as busts, and this guy can't play, and they got to get rid of him. I mean, New England shipped him off to Jacksonville for a late round draft pick, and there was no future for him in New England. But there are certain quarterback coaches, and I put Kyle Shanahan in that category, certainly offensive coaches that are just so good at what they do that just the schematics of the thing and the environment that they build, it helps engender that confidence that can put people back on track. And that's what we've seen for 3 games with Mac.
What about Pearsall and Jennings?
Ricky Pearsall has been, every injury that he's had, it seems like it takes him longer than they expect. It's always, we think he's going to be out here then. It's another couple of weeks. It's the same thing in this case. He's got a knee issue that's going on. They thought that he would be back practicing by now. He wasn't out there. Doesn't mean he's not going to play on Sunday. And same thing with Juwan Jennings. He's got a couple of different injuries going on. He's been banged up kind of perpetually. The good news, you mentioned Kendrick Bourne, who we had on the Insiders the other night, one of the happiest guy, the eternal optimist. He's just blown away. But what did he have, like 10 catches for 140 yards or something crazy last week? Think about who they're throwing to. It was Kendrick Bourne, who wasn't on the team at the start of camp. Sky Moore, who they traded for during camp. Marquez Valdez-Scantling wasn't there during camp, and Demarcus Robinson was suspended at the start of the season. They're literally an entire JV number 2 unit wide receiver group, and they find ways to get those guys out there. Again, I remember saying this to Kyle Shanahan one time. I think it was during the Brandon Ayuk stuff last year, and I was sitting in his office, and I'm like, dude, well, you're as good at scheming up people as anybody. And he's like, no, it's a lot easier if you have good players to scheme it up for. And he's right. Elite receivers make everybody look better, but he finds a way. If you've got a trait, if you've got speed, if you've got route running ability, he's able to put you in positions to succeed. And that's one of the things that makes Kyle Shanahan special as a coach.
Tom Pelissero joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show. Suzy Shuster in for Rich. Geno, how long does he have in Vegas?
It's bad right now.
It's not good. It's just not good.
He's really struggling, which, so I was at the week 1 game in Foxborough where it was bumpy in the first half, but Geno stepped up and made a bunch of big time throws in the second half, to guys like, Trey Tucker and other players that, people, I don't think the average fan has heard of. Not having Brock Bowers is a big deal. That's the straw that stirs the drink. He got banged up, and I think in the fourth quarter of that game, has played, several games, but wasn't himself, then misses last week's game. No sign he'll be back. When you lose your number 1 weapon, it's not a wide receiver per se, but Brock Bowers is essentially a wide receiver. He just plays a little bit different spot on the field. That does have a ripple effect on everyone else, because quite frankly, they're just not that talented outside of Bowers, at the receiving positions. Jacoby Myers is a really good, solid receiver. He's not getting targeted for whatever reason right now. Beyond that, you're relying on a bunch of young guys. Michael Mayer, their number 2 tight end, has also been out in recent weeks here. But a lot of this just boils down to Geno, whether it's decision-making or accuracy. He's just not playing like we've seen Geno at his best. The Raiders are paying him $40 million this year. They gave him a raise. There was no signing bonus in that deal, and he's not due, guaranteed money beyond this season. So absolutely, there's a scenario in which they could move on from Geno Smith. But I don't get any sense right now that they're thinking about, benching him, going to Kenny Pickett. I don't know that Kenny Pickett is necessarily an upgrade. He didn't have a camp to kind of get used to how they're doing things with the Raiders either. At some point, some of the scrutiny is probably going to fall on Chip Kelly in this entire thing. They've got a young guy in Ashton Genty who's a ton of fun to watch, especially over these last couple of games. How do you leverage him, take some of the pressure off of Geno Smith? Pete Carroll made reference to that the other day when he was asked about how do you get Geno on track. He said, we got to run the football more and we got to run it better. That's kind of the answer that Pete has for everything from an offensive perspective. You go back to all those years with Russell Wilson, as much as people wanted to let Russ cook, a big part of the reason they were successful was they were the best running team in the NFL for a large portion of that time. And they didn't need Russ to go out and throw the ball over the yard for the first 3 quarters of the game. And until, hey, fourth quarter, we're down. All right, Russ, now do your magic. It's kind of the same thing with Geno Smith, who was in that same type of a structure here. Right now, for whatever reason, they don't really have that balance. Bauer's absence is a huge part of it. But certainly the longer that the struggles would go on for Geno Smith, the more we're talking about are the Raiders back in the quarterback market in 2026.
Tom, thanks for your time. Have a safe flight here. And don't forget, I bring the guys food, so just don't come empty-handed.
Wow.
Well, you got to set that bar. That's not cool.
I got to throw darts. I got to throw darts. You come at the seat, you got to defend.
What did you bring them? What did you bring them?
Donuts.
Oh, donuts. Yeah. We love donuts.
Yeah, that's what they need.
Yeah, we love donuts.
Wow.
Because they all need baked goods.
Suzy, not only does he not bring us food, I got to drive him around like I'm Miss Daisy, or he's Miss Daisy.
All right. We'll find
it's ridiculous. You have it so good when I'm here. And,
And we love that. We love that, Suze. Yeah, thanks.
Right. Tommy,
safe flight, pal.
buddy.
Bye, Tom.
See you guys.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks again.
Peace.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app 12 to 3 Eastern.